This is our third and final Sunday in our season of gratitude and commitment. This Sunday, we talk about what it means to step into God's mission in the world. Listen for the living word of the Lord from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 9, verses 23 through 25. And Jesus said to them all, "If any wish to come after me, let them deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will save it. For what does it profit them if they gain the whole world, but lose or forfeit themselves?" Holy wisdom, holy words. Thanks be to God. I just spent several days with new church people. We introduced ourselves over and over and over in different groups, where we were from, what church we attended or served, how many times we had been at a Presbyterian older adult ministry network event. Usually at church events, we introduce ourselves with our name, our church that we attend, how many years we have been a member, maybe our family, and maybe what do you do in the church. That usually takes the form of I'm an elder or a deacon or on the blank committee. As Jesus began his public ministry, he stood in the midst of the congregation at his hometown synagogue, and he proclaimed the mission of God and his part in it. "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me," he said, "because he has anointed me," which means set apart as holy or consecrated to a task, "anointed me to bring good news to the poor. The Spirit has sent me to proclaim release to the captives, recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor," which is a Jubilee year, which means all debt was forgiven and people were given a chance to start over, to start fresh. Not a word about 5-year plans, membership goals, stewardship challenges, building projects. Not a word about picking up your cross as something that you really don't like doing, but it needs to be done. So that's your cross to bear in the service of God, which is how I've always heard this passage taught. Not a word about deciding who is in this community we call disciples, who deserves the title, who is judged to be less than what they should be, who's a real Christian and who is not. God's mission is grounded in relationship. The Spirit anoints Jesus, brings the sacred to his participation in God's mission. And God's been working on all that way before Jesus came to do his work. Jesus didn't make up the work. He doesn't claim he's got a new way of doing it. He doesn't write a book about his journey. Jesus follows the Spirit into the mission of God. We heard some stories about God moments this week at this retreat that we went to. And I was reading a book on the Trinity by Richard Rohr in those moments between events and conversations. And this life-changing question, this third life-changing question, asking what it means to join God on mission in the world, was answered again and again this week for me with the word relationship. Rohr starts, "In the beginning was relationship. Father, Son, Spirit. Creator, Redeemer, Sustainer." Our words are never enough to fully describe the deep relationality of the triune God. We can see it, though, especially if we are looking with relational eyes. This is how the Eastern Christian Church has always talked about the Trinity. We in the West have made the Trinity a little bit more object and transaction. Rohr reminds us that God is not the eternal threatener, watching and judging our every move, seeing if we're going to give enough, do enough, be enough. Instead, God is the ultimate participant. God is an inseparable part of us, acting for and with and in us from creation. We cannot be separated from God. We're in everything together, both the good and the painful. And Rohr insists that instead of looking at God as an omnipotent monarch, judging our choices and our effectiveness and our sincerity from a distance, that God's reality is invitation to engage with the divine, which then replicates itself in us and in all the array of creation. The work of God is not watching life from far away, judging and condemning what doesn't go well, but God being inherent in life itself, God, the life force of everything. Instead of God being turned into an object like any other object, how about God being the life energy between each and every object and person? Roar continues to remind us that whether we know it or not, the invitation from this triune God is not an invitation with which we can agree or disagree. The invitation is a description of what is already happening in God and in everything created by this relational God. Roar identifies a profound and painful sense of disconnection that leads to our evils. And I spent some time thinking about that this week, and it does make a lot of sense. There's no good news for the poor when those who have enough and more than enough are so separated from the lives of the poor that there's just no realistic concept of their struggles. Disconnect means we hold each other captive to stereotypes and artificial divisions based on everything under the sun. We refuse to acknowledge our biases. We refuse to listen to and trust the experiences of others. Disconnect means we refuse to learn to see differently, maybe to learn to see at all. We are blind. The oppressed are assigned blame for their oppression, and opportunities for forgiveness are dismissed as unfair or just refused altogether. Taking up your cross is Jesus' invitation to relational ministry, I think. As Jesus saw people as God saw them, and if people were open to seeing Jesus see them as valued and beloved, if people were willing to accept that they were part of who God is, part of God's family, and that God was part of them, that's when Jesus' deep relational invitation to follow would draw you in, engage your gifts, and enable you to see others as God sees them. The cross is the ultimate symbol of sacrificial love. Our cross doesn't symbolize the most difficult and distasteful things we have to do. Taking up our cross, I think, is God's invitation to step into a flow, a love, a wholeness, a holiness that is offered to all. It is the connection to the disconnect, a joining of spirit and self and society and space. Participation in God's mission isn't a program, isn't a membership, isn't a pronouncement of salvation after a few words or an action. It is not an absence of sin, a ticket to heaven, a cultural status of a good citizen. Taking up the cross is receiving and subsequent offering of a gift already given, already ours, a gift grown and revealed to others when we engage the life offered through the cross of Jesus, and when we let go, step aside, reach out, and follow in relationship of love. This third question, what does it mean to participate in the mission of God, is not a question about how many years we've been members of a church, and it's not about all the things we do that we think will make God happy. It's about embracing fully that flow of relationship back and forth with the triune God. It is a deep commitment to the understanding that there has to be a connection with the one who creates and what has been created. Jesus lived that reality completely, shared that reality with whoever he was with, met the needs he could meet, and accomplished the mission in front of him, and invited people to step into the flow with him, to join in the tasks, to participate in God's mission of nurturing holy relationship in all of creation. This is discipleship. This is living in community, sharing in the holy flow of God's mission, and strengthening each other for the work. This is the sacred work of God's mission in the world. And our language about it matters. How would our lives perhaps be shaped if we introduced ourselves as beloved children of God and shared how God's eyes of love cracked us open to loving others? How might our faith communities be changed if every moment of every day we took up the cross of love that brings the eternally flowing life of the Trinitarian God into our space and our relationships? Our work and our play, our nights and our days, our celebrations and our sorrows. If we loved God's energy and mission into everyone and everything we came into contact with, what would it look like? If we didn't care how many years we'd been around, but how many people had seen God's work for us and in us and through us. Amen.